Hey, my name is Chris Brennan, and this is your year ahead horoscope for Libra and Libra rising for the entire year of 2023. So this year I'm live streaming my horoscopes to YouTube and other platforms in order to get some of my predictions out there before we do our big year ahead forecast next Friday on December 16th, 2022. So let's go ahead and jump right into looking at your chart and looking at what some of the major transits are going to be over the course of the next 12 months. My horoscopes are primarily meant to be read relative to your rising sign, although you can also look at them from the perspective of your sun sign, especially if you were born during the day, or your moon sign, especially if you were born at night. So here's some of the major transits of 2023 and some of the dates involved for those watching the video version of this horoscope, in case you want to refer back to this later on in the forecast. So the first transit that I want to talk about is the Mars retrograde in Gemini in your ninth house of religion, philosophy, belief, education, and foreign travel that's going to be finishing up over the course of the first 3 months of 2023. So this Mars retrograde is happening in your ninth house, and the transit really began last August as soon as Mars moved into Gemini and into your ninth house, but it intensified in late October when Mars slowed down and stationed retrograde on October 30th, which should have represented an intensification of this transit at that time. So Mars transits can be kind of tricky because Mars usually signifies things like strife, contention, stress, fighting, and other keywords along those lines typically. So with this transit going through your ninth house, it could indicate some tensions when it comes to education. More broadly, the ninth house represents our beliefs, which can be like political beliefs. It can be religious or philosophical beliefs or spiritual beliefs. But this Mars transit may indicate some tension in this area of your life or some conflict with others that arise as a result of either what you believe or what other people in your life believe that's somehow coming into conflict with you. So sometimes this doesn't have to be negative, but some of these conflicts can be constructive or positive, and Mars transits occasionally, especially for those with night charts, can just indicate a period of time in which you're putting a lot more energy and effort into this area than at other times. Since the ninth house is education and foreign travel, for many of you, it may just be applied to those areas in terms of this just being a period of greater energy output in that area than other times in your life. So this transit is going to have one more period of intensification when Mars stations direct on January 12th, and then the transit will officially end on the 25th of March when Mars departs from Gemini and leaves that sign entirely. All right, so moving on to the next transit, we have Saturn in March departing from Aquarius, where it's been transiting for 3 years in your fifth house of children and leisurely activities. And Saturn's going to move into Pisces, which is your sixth house of work and health matters. So this can inaugurate essentially a 3-year period in which you're going to have greater focus on either work or health matters and trying to put better structures in your life surrounding both of those topics, or at least one of those topics in particular. So some people, when Saturn goes into their sixth house, if there's like health or dietary or exercise things that they've kind of been letting go or haven't been very focused on up to this point, they can find themselves needing to address those issues and starting to build a better foundation in their life at this time. So this could mean going to the gym, it could mean trying different diets or other things just in order to improve your physical health and address any health issues that may arise at this time. In other instances, this can pertain to our work situation, especially if we find ourselves in a subordinate role to somebody else, or alternatively, if we have people that work under us as employees. This can sometimes come up in a sixth house context. And when Saturn goes into this house, it can sometimes indicate a period of some challenges coming up in this area, but eventually needing to push through and overcome some of those challenges so that you emerge on the other end stronger as a result. So that transit's really going to begin in March and will last through the rest of the year, and it will you'll experience it with greater periods of intensity or less intensity over the course of the next 3 years, as Saturn's going to be transiting through your 6th house all the way through 2026. All right, so those are two of the transits happening this year. Another one that's happening is Pluto is going to dip into Aquarius for just a few months between March and June. This is kind of a preview of a longer term transit of Pluto going through your 5th house. The fifth house representing children, creativity, pleasure, and also sex and romance. So Saturn's been transiting through this house for the past 3 years, which may have coincided with a period of greater restrictions and obstacles and difficulties when it comes to some of those topics. So the good news is that Saturn departing from this area of your life means that that area is actually going to lighten up, and you're going to feel kind of like a cloud has been lifted off of that area of your life that's been making things more serious over the course of the past 3 years since early 2020, when Saturn first went into your 5th house and first moved into Aquarius. So the flip side of that is that Pluto, when it goes into Aquarius, is going to bring a new level of intensity and transformation to this area of your life that maybe didn't exist before up to this point. So this may intensify some romantic relationships, since the 5th house pertains to that. It also may bring some major transformations in your life through the process or through the topic of children, whether it's your children or other people's children, somehow starting to become a little bit more important at this point. So for many of you, this isn't going to be a transit that stands out immediately unless you have fixed placements in your birth chart early in the fixed signs in very early degrees, but it may just be something to pay attention to as a bit of a shift, because that's going to foreshadow some later Pluto transits that are going to take place over the course of the next 20 years, as Pluto is going to be transiting through Aquarius until the early 2040s. So pretty long-term transit that we're getting just a brief 3-month preview of in the second quarter of 2023. All right, moving on to some of the more positive transits that are happening this year. One of my favorite ones that's going to take place is that Jupiter is going to ingress into Aries, and it's going to spend the first 5 months of the year of 2023 in that sign. So the 7th house, this is the 7th house for you, and the 7th house pertains to relationships, particularly romantic ones, including marriage and partnership, but also sometimes business relationships, or occasionally just close one-on-one partnerships in general in your life. So Jupiter moving into this sign should represent a period of growth and expansion when it comes to relationships in general in the first 5 months of the year. And this is probably one of the most positive or optimistic transits that you're going to be having in 2023, right there in the first 5 months of the year until about the middle of May. So some of you already got a preview of what this transit should be like last year, when Jupiter dipped into Aries for just a little bit, but now it's coming back starting in December of 2022 with kind of like a vengeance, and we're going to see a much more optimistic and much more positive time for relationships taking place in the first part of the year. This is actually emphasized because we're also going to see some eclipses taking place starting in April in your 7th house of relationships. And usually that means you're beginning a period of major beginnings and major endings when it comes to relationships. But because Jupiter is going to transit there at the same time, I think that these changes should ultimately be pretty positive and pretty growth-oriented when it comes to relationships, so that even if you see some relationships reaching sort of an ending point or coming to the end of one chapter, it should be opening up a new chapter at the same time. I know some of you, when Jupiter dipped into Aries last year, either started major relationships or had some relationships getting more serious at that time. One of my favorite Libra rising examples, for example, was Britney Spears, who got married last year when Jupiter went into her 7th house of relationships. And this might be a good time for thinking more seriously about relationships in general for the first 5 months of the year, because you're just going to happen to be in a position where things are going to be going a bit more smoothly than at other times in your life, all other things aside. All right, so that's first Jupiter transit, first 5 months. Second Jupiter transit starting in mid-May Jupiter's going to ingress into Taurus, and it's going to move into your 8th house of shared resources, inheritance, the assets or the finances that belong to others. And this is basically one of the financial sectors of your chart. So this usually represents the role that money plays in our life that belongs to other people. So this sometimes represents like the finances or assets of your partner, whether it's a romantic partner or a business partner. Whoever you're with at this time could be doing better financially for some reason than at other times, and this could then impact your life in a positive way financially. In other instances, 8th house transits can be sorting out issues pertaining to debt, inheritance, or taxes in a way that's ultimately positive or beneficial for you, especially for those of you that have day charts where you'll experience some of those Jupiter transits in a way that's a bit more positive. So that's a positive transit that's taking place essentially the entire second half of the year in the financial sector of your chart. Moving on, we also have a Venus retrograde that's taking place this year in the sign of Leo, which is your 11th house of friendship, groups, alliances, and social movements. So a Venus retrograde, usually generally speaking, can indicate unifying and reconciling things, or looking back at past relationships and reforging connections that were either lost or that got frayed at some point in the past. So for you, this, because it's happening in the friendship sector of your chart, it may have to do with looking back on past friendships, or sometimes even reconnecting with old friends from the past and bringing them forward or back into your life in the present in some way. So in terms of dates for that, the entire transit is going to start on June 5th as soon as Venus ingresses into Leo, because that's going to be the beginning of this very extended transit of Venus through your 11th house of friendships. But it's going to intensify on July 22nd when Venus slows down and stations retrograde. And then it's going to begin an intensified period of the transit where Venus is moving backwards through Leo for approximately 40 days and 40 nights, all the way until it stations direct on September 3rd. After that, we're going to be in the post-retrograde sort of cleanup phase until early October, when Venus eventually departs from Leo entirely and the transit is over. So that should be very much focused on friends, groups. For those of you with night charts, it should be especially positive and a good time to be with friends, or to make new friends, or go out and connect with new social groups at this time, or even look back and, as I said, reconnect with old ones. All right, the last thing I wanted to talk about here are the eclipses taking place this year, because we've got a shift where the eclipses are moving from the Taurus-Scorpio axis, where they've been for the past more than a year now, which is your financial axis, and the eclipses are about to shift into your 1st and 7th house axis, which is essentially your self versus relationships axis. So the Taurus Scorpio ones have been indicating major beginnings and major endings when it comes to the balance between your own financial resources and your own finances, which is the 2nd house, and the finances that you share, or the role that other people's finances play in your life at the same time, and trying to find balance between those two areas. So we're going to see new developments when it comes to your personal finances around the time of the eclipse on May 5th, which is in Scorpio in your 2nd house. And this should represent the culmination of a series of events that have been taking place over the course of the past year and a half when it comes to your personal finances and getting things in order when it comes to that. Then we're going to have the final Taurus eclipse in your 8th house of other people's resources on October 28th. And that'll be the final eclipse in that series when it comes to major beginnings and major endings in terms of other people's money. So after that point, we're going to see a shift where the eclipses are going to start jumping back and forth between your 1st house of self mind, body, and appearance, and indicating major beginnings and major endings in that area. And then the eclipses are going to start taking place in your seventh house of relationships and indicating major beginnings and major endings there. So usually what I see when people start having first house and seventh house eclipses is they start putting more focus on either themselves and what they need to do to make themselves happy, or they start putting more focus on other people and what they need to do in order to maintain relationships in their life. And usually what happens is they sort of teeter-totter back and forth over the period of about a year and a half, and sometimes putting more focus on themselves and other times putting more focus on their relationships. But each time it creates kind of an imbalance in one or another, and it keeps going back and forth over the course of a year and a half or so. So with the very first eclipse in Aries on April 20th, the focus should be on relationships, and it should be relatively positive in terms of new beginnings in relationships and thinking relatively optimistically about that sphere of life, because that's falling in Aries in your seventh house, and because Jupiter will be there at the same time, which puts kind of a positive spin on that eclipse, even though eclipses otherwise sometimes can indicate periods of things being kind of up in the air or things being kind of chaotic. I think the Jupiter co-presence there in the seventh house at the same time should smooth things out, so that even if there is some instability, it should be relatively good or relatively positive, and should push things more towards the new beginnings type manifestation rather than the endings type manifestation. So later in the year, we're going to get the other side of that eclipse, though, where after focusing on relationships in the first half of the year more, when we get this Libra eclipse on October 14th, that should put the focus more on you and more on your sense of self, and changes when it comes to your self-perception and your sense of identity in the world. So sometimes that can indicate changes to your appearance, or making a deliberate change when it comes to that and your physical body and the way that you physically manifest yourself in the world. So sometimes putting greater focus on your health can come up and doing things to improve your health. Other times the first house can be more mental in focus, and it can put the focus more towards thinking about who you are and what you want in life and what your general direction in life should be, and what you need to do in order to be happy on your own, just as an individual, as opposed to somebody that's in relationships. So I think that creates kind of a divide between the first half of the year being more relationship focused and the second half of the year being more personally focused. But by the end of the year, as you move into 2024, I think you'll start finding more balance between those two things, and we will see a continuation of that eclipse series in your first and seventh houses that will lead into the next year of 2024. All right, so those are the major transits that I wanted to mention. So just to summarize some of the major topics, I think the main topics that you're going to be focused on, or that are going to come up this year, are going to focus on the concept of beliefs and you defining what your beliefs are, especially in some instances early in the year, even when those beliefs conflict or contradict those of other people in your life. So that's the ninth house transit. You're going to focus on health and physical wellness and doing it what it takes to improve your health and also maintain it. You're going to focus on relationships for sure, with Jupiter and eclipses taking place in your seventh house. And then finally, there's a major financial focus for Libra risings as well this year, with those eclipses and that Jupiter transit taking place in your eighth house and your second house. But otherwise, I think that's it in terms of the major themes for next year, for 2023, for Libra and Libra rising. So good luck. Thanks for watching this forecast. Thanks everyone that joined me in the live chat. Be sure to join us next week, where we're going to do our big mundane forecast for 2023 and looking at all the major outer planet transits in more detail. You can sign up through our page on Patreon if you want to attend the live recording of that through Zoom and join the live chat. But otherwise, I'm going to run the credits now and answer a few questions in the live chat before I wrap up this broadcast. So thanks for watching, good luck, and I'll see you again next year. Special thanks to all the patrons that helped to support the production of this episode of the podcast through our page on patreon.com. In particular, shout out to the patrons on our producers tier, including Thomas Miller, Catherine Conroy, Christy Moe, Ariana Amour, Mandy Ray, Angelique Nambo, Issa Sabah, Jake Otero, Mimi Stargazer, and Jean-Marie Kaplan. If you appreciate the work I'm doing here on the podcast and you'd like to find a way to support it, then please consider becoming a patron through our page on patreon.com. In exchange, you can get access to bonus content that's only available to patrons of the podcast, such as early access to new episodes, the ability to attend the live recording of the monthly forecast episodes, our monthly auspicious elections podcast, or another exclusive podcast series called the Casual Astrology Podcast, or you can even get your name listed in the credits at the end of each episode. For more information, visit patreon.com/astrologypodcast. If you're looking to get an astrological consultation, we have a list of recommended astrologers at theastrologypodcast.com/consultations. The astrologers on the list are friends of the podcast that have been featured in different episodes over the years, and they have different specialties such as natal astrology, electional astrology, synastry, rectification, or horary astrology. You can get a 10% discount when you book a consultation with one of the astrologers on our list by using the promo code astrologypodcast. The astrology software that we use and recommend here on the podcast is called SolarFire for Windows, which is available for the PC at alabe.com. Use the promo code AP15 to get a 15% discount. For Mac users, we recommend a software program called AstroGold for Mac OS, which is from the creators of SolarFire for PC, and it includes both modern and traditional techniques. You can find out more information at astrogold.io, and you can use the promo code AstroPodcast15 to get a 15% discount. If you'd like to learn more about my approach to astrology, then I'd recommend checking out my book titled Hellenistic Astrology, The Study of Fate and Fortune, where I go over the history, philosophy, and techniques of ancient astrology, taking people from beginner up through intermediate and advanced techniques for reading birth charts. You can get a print copy of the book through Amazon or other online retailers, or there's an ebook version available through Google Books. I also recently published a new translation of the anthology of the 2nd century astrologer Vedius Valens, which is one of the most important sources for understanding the practice of ancient astrology. You can find that by searching for Vedius Valens, the anthology on Amazon or other online book retailers. If you're really looking to expand your studies of astrology, then I would recommend my Hellenistic Astrology course, which is an online course on ancient astrology where I take people through basic concepts up through intermediate and advanced techniques for reading birth charts. There's over 100 hours of video lectures as well as guided readings of ancient texts, and by the time you finish the course, you will have a strong foundation in how to read birth charts, as well as make predictions. You can find out more information at courses.theastrologyschool.com. I also recently launched a new course there called the Birth Time Rectification course, where I teach students how to figure out your birth time using astrology when the birth time is either unknown or uncertain. You can find out more information about that at theastrologyschool.com. Each year, the podcast releases a set of astrology calendar posters for the coming year, and we've just released our 2023 planetary alignments and planetary movements posters, which are now available on our website at theastrologypodcast.com/store. There you can also pick up our 2023 electional astrology report, where Lisa Scheim and I went through the next 12 months, and we picked out the single most auspicious date for each month using the principles of electional astrology. You can get that at theastrologypodcast.com/2023 report. And finally, thanks to our sponsors, including the Mountain Astrologer magazine, which is a quarterly astrology magazine which you can read in print or online at mountainastrologer.com. Finally, thanks also to the Northwest Astrology Conference, which is happening May 25th through the 29th, 2023, just outside of Seattle. This year's conference is going to be a hybrid conference where you can either attend online or in person. Find out more information at norwac.net.